12 years and pretty much served in multiple different roles as an application engineer, as a design engineer. And pretty much what my role is, I'm a classroom systems designer, and I design learning spaces. As far as with a lot of you, I've met you guys in the past with regards to the conferences here, as well as a few other conferences as well. And what I'm going to talk about is with regards to our capture streaming and our recording solutions that we have as well. And we'll look at a few different things. We'll look at, in terms of our one-button studio application and what are the different features of that. How can you scale that out? We'll talk about streaming in terms of different types of streamings that are there as well. And we'll also talk about as far as, how can you manage that content? How do you take that content and deliver it to a centralized location for consumption purposes? Now, with regards to lecture capture or a video capture, with higher education in general right now, with the learning outcomes being key and essential, so streaming and capture has become something more important as you've seen in your space. And so we'll see what are some points to consider when you take a look at those things, right? How many of you guys are currently doing a capture right now, just a show of hand in your classes? Okay. So there's a good amount of you, and a few of you that are not, maybe we can learn about something and how we can expand that from there. Now, in terms of Extron applications in education and where do we fit in, right? There's a few different places. We can have self-recording applications with our SMP, which we'll take a look at. So spaces that are like maker studios where students can go in and do the recording, and how exactly would that work? We'll talk about that. With live streaming, so with Extron, we have devices that that'll allow you to live stream as far as H.264, do RTMP streaming, and we'll see as far as what are the advantages and what are the ways in which you can take open standards and have that streamed across different areas. And lecture capture, that's something also that we've gotten into recently. We want to talk about as well. And currently, our solution is a hardware-based solution. We also have soft capture as well in addition to that, and we can see as far as what are different options with it. And then we'll talk about the Entwine media platform as far as how we tie everything together. So let's say if you want to take something that's been either ad hoc recorded or something that's in a one-button studio-like application, how do you take that and present it from a centralized location? And we'll see with Entwine, how can we make that happen? A lot of you may have already seen the slide, but it's worthwhile revisiting. As you already know, majority of the time, people remember only 10% of things that they hear. And same thing with regards to what they read, it's only 20%. And what they see and do is 80%. And there's a saying, right, the picture is worth 1,000 words. And if you look at 1 minute of a video, which is 60 seconds and 60 frames per second, and do the math, so a 1 minute video might be worth like 3.6 million words at that point of time. And this is something that you're already aware of. And this has been proven consistently in the past that students in general respond favorably to a video. They do it on a personal level as well with YouTube, Khan Academy. They're coming in from K-12 to higher ed. They already have that expectation where if they want to learn something, they're used to certain ways of learning and how we can accomplish that. So, we'll take a look at and see what we can provide. So as far as on campus right now with self-recording applications, like how do you guys currently have that? Are there spaces that you guys do self-recording at, or any particular area currently? Anybody is doing any kind of self-recording? So you guys are doing something like flipped classrooms that may be recorded or maybe provided for. So the percentages right there are pretty much what it is it shows in terms of feedback we got from customers in terms of what they want the recordings for. So for flipped classroom, for assignments, for classes as well, to get that recorded. You could do things like announcements and rehearsals. So like for theater, we've seen it in like speech classes. People do speech recordings as well and get that provided to different people. On the corporate side, we see it as well. So in terms of being able to record meetings or being able to record product demonstrations. Being an engineer, sometimes I'll get a call from a customer and they'll be like, how do you do this? And I'll actually record it on my computer or via camera or with my iPhone and have it sent across to customers. So that way it's much more apparent on how to make something happen rather than me putting it verbal on an email. So there's a lot of different applications when you look at with a self-recording, and there's a lot of different ways in which we can accomplish that goal as well. So this is an example of a self-recording studio, and this is at Essex Business School. In this case, you're looking at something that's a full-blown studio. On the On the right-hand side, you see a podium with a panel. There's a room control, room automation. So this is an example of something that could be a full-blown studio that's managed by somebody, right? Or you could go something more granular, something like self-recording, a kiosk, right? It could be something as simple as these right here. So this is at Manchester, a University of Manchester, and pretty much a self-recording studio at that point with a kiosk where a student could walk up and do the recording and walk away with a USB drive with their content on that as well. And on the right-hand side, this is a Notre Dame University, and they're using the SMP as well. And you can see there's a panel that's tying into that, and they can do the recording with that as well and walk away with it. But there's some common issues and challenges that you face when you do self-recording, right? When you do a space that somebody could walk into, I mean, it's got to be very user-friendly that anybody could then walk up to it, get an understanding of what it is, what it does, and do the recording themselves. So it's got to be very user-friendly. I mean, there's got to be issues with regards to quality of video, right? I mean, you could do recording on a computer, but it's not as high quality, right? There could be lag, or the information is not as apparent or clear. So that's another thing to keep in mind into ensuring that you're providing quality video to students as well. Something else that we see is, I mean, complex control. I mean, there's a lot of times you walk into spaces and controls are very complicated. I mean, and a lot of times people are not very comfortable dealing with that. So we got to ensure that it's something that's very easy to use at that point of time. Otherwise, I mean, I walked into the room right here to present with my laptop, but then I'd switch everything out on the go and use something else that's here. So it could be okay for some people. I mean, I do it, but for other people who may not do it all the time, that could be an issue, right? And something else you'll see a lot with regards to self-recording studios or one-button studio-like applications, usually a Mac or a PC, then you're also involved with updates to that as well. You got to ensure that whatever you're doing with that Mac or PC, it's up to date, so there's security issues. Now, in terms of the recording that's done, what do you do with that recording? How do you ensure that somebody is not recording something inappropriate within that? How do you ensure that as well? So there's some things to consider. And how do you guys currently manage that right now for self-recording studios? Is it pretty much anybody can walk in and do their recording and walk away with that? Or is that something that you guys currently manage it so you know what's going on?
Yeah, we book it and we manage it with people on site.
Okay, so it's booked and somebody is there to make sure that, okay, that it's not being used inappropriately. Right. I mean, there are challenges with that, right? There are challenges with that, totally. So what we've done is we've taken a lot of concerns that we've seen in the industry with one-button studio and a few other things, and we've kind of condensed that and came up with a solution called the Studio Station solution. And the Studio Station solution is a one-button, one-touch studio solution, and pretty much what you could do with that, it's very easy to use. Somebody could walk up to it and insert the USB drive. It'll automatically power on the lights. It'll automatically power on the camera and the display locally that's in there. All they're doing at that point of time is they're hitting a record button right here, and then it'll initiate a recording. And as far as all you need is you just need to add these right there. You just need to add your lights, your display, and you need to add your camera to that as well. And it's an all-in-one solution, and we can go over in terms of what's in there. I mean, it has a recorder as well as a control cables and a power controller. We're going to take a look at each one of them individually and see how they add up. In terms of the recording, so you can see when somebody walks up to that, that's the only thing they see. So that's a user point of input into the system. They just have a USB drive they connect, and that automatically powers on the system. And based on that, then they can initiate a recording. They have the ability to stop recording. They could pause it, and they can also do a chapter mark as well too at that point. So in terms of a demonstration on how a layout, the system, a diagram for that will look like, I mean, this is an example of that. So somebody walks up and they connect the USB drive. And then once that's connected, it's automatically going to power on the lights, and it's going to power on a display. There is a Studio Station 100, which is the SMP 100. That's an encoder and streamer, as well as there's a controller right there. And the camera connects in HDMI, and then a wireless mic could go into that as well, or you could use embedded audio as well with that. Any questions on the design for that? So what's in the kit? Let's talk about that. So the nice thing about Studio Station is that you could go online right now to Extron's website, and you could go to Studio Station Builder and pretty much build a kit. With that kit, what you'll do is it'll get you a part number, and that part number can be ordered, and that'll include everything. And we'll talk about what's in that kit. So on the control side, we have the RCP, a module right there, RCP 101. There's also an input plate right there. So let's say if you want to have an HDMI input into the system, a student wants to bring their own laptop and connect into it. They don't want to use something that's pre-existing in there. You have the option with that as well. It includes USB and power and cables as well. It has that as an option. In terms of the encoder, what's in there, it's the SMP 111, and we'll talk about that as well in a bit. And there's power controllers. There's the PC1i or the PCS4i, and what that does is that looks for a USB input detection. Once it sees that, you'll automate all the environment from there based on lights or the displays or anything else at that point. And cables as well. I mean, that's important, right? I mean, you got to have the HDMI cables and everything in place. So the whole kit includes all that as part of it. And as far as what you need to add on your end would be the actual camera and the confidence monitor. So usually when you're doing something like this or you're doing a presentation, as a presenter, you always want to have a confidence screen. So what's being shown on screen, right? You always have that. So you always want to make sure that you add that as well. And audio, so that's important. So you want to make sure that there's a microphone that's either in there or there's a wireless mic if, let's say, the presenter wants to be back from the camera as well. Or you could even use cameras that have the audio capability built into it. The encoder has the ability to take a video and audio from that HDMI feed of the camera. A USB drive, of course, I mean, that's obvious. And lights. And that's actually very important, and we'll talk about that. You know, there's a lot of different studios, and we looked at a few different examples earlier. When you look at studio lights, so this is an example of our studio at Extron, and what we have is we have our key light right here that points to us. That's the confidence screen as well. And you know, and the camera is at eye level as well. So right here we give you some key parameters to look at when you're designing a button studio or a studio station kit where it's a recording studio. The key thing to keep in mind is that camera always needs to be at eye level. Your key light needs to be in the front, so it pretty much adds light to the presenter, and the fill light on the side to remove any shadows on the back as well as the highlight on top. And if you follow these simple parameters, I mean, you know, you can produce pretty amazing videos with that. I mean, you know, based on different lighting options with there. So currently with your studios right now, do you guys have it as a full studio where lights and everything are there and in place for you guys, or how do you guys do that? You have full thing like that. Okay, that's cool. So let's talk about the SMP 111, which is the actual encoder in the studio station. The key thing to remember with the box is that everything about the box is open standard. There's nothing proprietary about it. So in terms of recording, it's an MP4 file. The stream from it is an H.264 stream, and there's RTP, RTMP. RTMP, the advantage is that you could tie the box directly to YouTube Live or Facebook Live or Ustream or Wowza, anything else like that. It'll automatically send it out from there. So you know, you don't have to do anything with that. And it'll do things like pull streaming and push streaming. Those are different things that are associated with it. As far as with regards to the unit itself, it's pretty small. It's only half rack, 1 U high. There's HDMI in and HDMI out on it. The HDMI out gives you the confidence monitor right there. There's some options that are included with the studio station as well too. I mean, one way you could do that is for something as simple as, you know, if somebody wants to bring their own laptop, you can add an SMP 351 or 352, which we'll look at, that gives you the ability to do a multi-channel input or a recording at that point with camera as well. So you have options with that. The studio station is actually also used with a learning glass. I don't know if you guys, how many of you guys have used a learning glass, or have you guys seen this in the past? Yeah, those are pretty popular right now. And pretty much with that, what happens is that when the instructor walks in, they're able to initiate a recording for the learning glass and be able to record that to the SMP. And something that's unique about the SMP is that is the ability to flip the image. Because if you guys have used the learning glass, I mean, the instructors actually are writing on the board. So from the other perspective, it's actually flipped. So with the SMP, you have the ability to flip the image horizontally back. So when the recording is done and somebody is viewing it, they're automatically able to see it in the correct format at that point. And that's important because, you know, a lot of times you got to buy specific cameras that have the ability to flip the image. But with this, you can automatically make that happen within the SMP itself. So that's something to keep in mind as well. We've seen people use it with regards to chroma keying and everything else. Let's say you have a green screen on the background and somebody wants to add things like a specific background, like with news and everything else. We've seen students use it in that scenario. You could have transparency associated with that. So let's say if you want to add a logo in the background for certain departments, you have that as an option. There's a lot you could do with that with just the SMP and the Studio Station itself. So it gives you capabilities with that. I touched upon earlier that within the Studio Station, I mean, there's 3 iterations of encoder that you can use. There's the SMP111, the 351, and 352. The primary difference between the 3 is the fact that the SMP111 is a single channel encoder, right? So just a camera and audio, and that's it. The 351 is a dual channel, and you can get a dual channel with that, but it's a composite of that image with audio as well. And the 352 allows you to take both channels and record that independently and stream that independently as well, too. So as a consumer of that content, they have the ability to pick and choose how they want to consume that content at that point. And with the 351 and 352, there's an internal hard drive that's 80 gig or 400 gig. That equates to about a day's worth of recording or a week's worth of recording. Now, the internal hard drive is primarily for staging area, right? So you're not going to use that for long-term repository. Once the recording is done, it's going to upload to a centralized location. And that could be an FTP server. It could be a file server at that point. We can publish into Kaltura. We could publish into Entwine. There's a few different options with that we could look at as well. And in terms of streaming, this just gives you an example of if you're streaming or if you're recording at 10 megs per second, what kind of space utilization you're looking at right there. For the most part, I mean, you could get by with 720p or 1080p, and that's going to look pretty good because, of course, storage is going to be an issue if you want to archive it and keep it for long term. That's always there, right? Now, if you do the 351 and 352, you have the ability to use a touch panel with that as well, too. So let's say if you want to give students the option or instructors the option to go to these studios or a location, be able to pick a layout. So let's say if an instructor wants to do a PIP or just a single recording, or they want to do a side-by-side, they can start the recording from there or stop the recording from there. Or let's say the instructor wants to walk up to the panel and they want to enter in their Active Directory, a credential, and be able to authenticate into the system. So that way it's in a controlled environment. You don't have anybody just walking up to a system and initiating a recording or adding something that's inappropriate. You can have that as well, too. And these are just a few different examples in terms of what a layout for that would look like. I mean, you could do some of that or keep it something as simple as the RCP 101. I mean, with that, it's pretty straightforward. If you're using a 352, it's going to record both channels independently at any given time. So somebody walks up, all they are concerned with is they start the recording, they stop the recording, and they have a USB drive input right there. So that makes it really, really easy at that point of time in terms of what they want to do. The layout choice is not there because both channels are being recorded, and we'll see what that would look like on the consumer side. So as an example, if you're doing a single channel recording, what that would look like is something like this. So it's just a single channel. You have a video as well as the audio. That a video feed could be from a computer. It could be from a camera, as well as the audio coming from the camera or the microphone that you have right there. If you're doing a 351, which has the dual channel, and it's creating a composite of those 2 channels, so from there, it's going to give you this option, and you have the presenter slides on the right, but you can't change that layout because once you have the recording done, it's a composite of those 2 channels. And with 352, if you do that, then that's going to have you the option of being able to change those different inputs right there. So you can, as a student or instructor, pick and choose if you want to view channel A or channel B. Channel A could be your content feed that's being shown on screen. Channel B could be the camera feed that we have right here, and then the audio goes in there as well, too. Question? No, actually, it does not. Apparently, they want us to use this when we do that.
Does that require Entwine as the player, or how do you have those controls, say, if you're using Kaltura or YouTube?
Right. So that's a great question. So with the SMP, the 3 encoders we talked about, the 111, 351, 352, they're standalone. So when they do the recording, you don't need to have Entwine for that to be able to play that back. You could actually play it back within Kaltura or OpenCast or anything else. So one approach that we take a very open approach. There's a lot of different companies out there where you have to buy everything from them. But with our encoders, we can integrate with any third-party software. And it's not only Entwine. It could be Kaltura, OpenCast, or it could be you could create a custom workflow and tie it into any software at that point. Because the MP4 file created, and it has the associated like JSON files that could be tied in at that point with the chapter marks as well.
Which players support multi-video selection in
See,
their
that's
default
that's the
players?
caveat, right? So the player needs to have the capability to play it back. So our player has that capability, and I'll talk about that with the HTML5 player. Now, because it's MP4 files, you can use any player to play it back. But now the question is, like, which player has the capability to play back? I'm like a multi-channel that we have right here. That's on whichever software you're using. So if you're using Kaltura, then Kaltura needs to have that capability like Entwine does. If you're using OpenCast, then OpenCast needs to have that capability that Entwine has the ability to play it back. But again, we're using open standards, so there's nothing proprietary about these boxes. Everything that you see with the box that's getting generated can be played back anywhere as long as they have the capability to do so. That's a great question. And something else I want to touch upon right here is these chapter marks that you see right here. What happens is that within the SMP, if you have designated a certain channel to be a presenter channel and it's tied into Entwine, it has the ability to auto-generate these chapter marks based on image changes on screen. And then you can also scrub the timeline right here, and you'll see pop-ups of those, and you can then go automatically to that. Both channel A and B are also time synchronized as well, so they're not out of sync with a video and audio. So if, let's say, anything you're using to play back that content can be played back from there as well. Question, go ahead.
If you're using the touch panel, can you change your composition throughout the presentation?
Yes, so with the SMP, which is a great question. With the SMP, you can change the composition of the layout while the recording is going on and while it's streaming. So that can happen in real time. Something else that's a great point you bring up, I want to talk about the SMP, is that everything about the SMP we looked at happens at the same time. It's not an or operation, it's an and operation. So it's recording, it's live streaming, it's uploading content, it's doing chapter marks, everything's happening simultaneously. And something else we looked at earlier with the USB recording, so the finalization process on that is only a few seconds. Like I'm talking about 1 or 2 seconds. I mean, you're not having to wait. Internally within the hard drive, it's instantaneous at that point as well, too. It's going to finalize the MP4 file. And then if you're using Entwine, what it's going to do, it's going to do a partial track ingest and start uploading content at that point to Entwine as well. And if you're using anything else, and once it's finished, then it's going to start uploading to an FTP site or anywhere else that you wanted to go. That's a great question, though. Yeah, so these are examples of screens as far as what it would look like based on if you're consuming content that's being generated from the 111, 351, or 352. And as you can see with the 352, of course, the advantage is the fact that because both channels are recorded independently, it's up to the consumer of the content to pick and choose how they consume that content at that point of time. You don't have to worry about anything. So you can use something as simple as this right there for those applications, or even use touch panels. I mean, right now in our classrooms, what we do is we record all our classes. So let's say when I go in there, I can pick and choose what I want to do, or I can just hit a record button, it'll record everything in the room, and at that point I can go and view and pick and choose which channel I want to view at that point. So we talked about a few things. We looked at, simple recording studios. We looked at with the SMP 351, 352, you could do a multi-channel recording. And then we talked a little bit about streaming. So the boxes, as I said, they stream out. So they can do RTMP streaming, RTSP streaming, and that's happening at the same time while it's recording. That's always live. So let's talk about streaming as well. So it's streaming scalability, right? So when you talk about streaming, there are a few different ways you can accomplish this now. Now with the boxes, because they send a stream out from it, which is an RTMP stream or an H.264 stream, you can automatically have that natively tied to any one of the popular service providers out there. Something as simple as Facebook Live, YouTube Live. I mean, you go into the SMP and you can go into the configuration page, you enter the URL for which account you want to stream to, and it'll automatically push that stream out at that point. If you want to have it tied to a CDN provider, let's say if you do any special events like commencement and everything like that, and you want to have that broadcast out to parents, let's say, you can have it tied to Amazon or Akamai or a Ustream or anything like that, and it'll pretty much has a native ties to that. Now, for a lot of schools, you guys are pretty savvy as well, too, and you may run your own media server in-house, like a Wowza or something else. And if you use something like that, then you have the ability to do a tie with that. And you can take the SMP and tie it to your Wowza server, and then from there, it'll automatically multicast it out to all the different types of devices. So if you're using something like a set-top box, and that's an MPEG-2 transport stream, if you're using RTMP streaming, if you're doing smooth streaming with Microsoft or HLS with Apple, And as an example with that, I mean, if you look at an application, a diagram, so let's say you have that similar, a one-button studio application or a lecture capture application, and you have the SMP there, you have camera feeds going in there, your wireless microphone, you have the control module as well, and you get a confidence screen right there. You can take that and have it used as an overflow because it'll send a stream out, or you can take that automatically from there to your a live streaming server, and then from there have it available for viewing purposes for students as well too, for a live event as well. Kind of like what's happening in here in this room. I mean, this room is being streamed out as well, live right now. Any questions on the streaming side, guys? You know, as far as now, when we looked at all these different applications, we looked at the one-button studio, we looked at the studio station recording and the SMP 351, 352. Now, let's say if you want to tie it all together and you want to automate that process. So if you want to automate the scheduling, the capture, the catalog, and ingest, and a distribution of content, you would use something like Entwine EMP. And in terms of where it's a good fit, I mean, anytime you need automation in the system, right? Anytime you want to take the content and have the schedule for that class being pulled from a centralized location, it could be R25, it could be EMS, anything that you guys are using, or Exchange, or a Google Calendar. And then from there, have the boxes automatically initialize recording, and then have it be published into any kind of LMS like Blackboard, Moodle, Sakai. And as far as, you know, based on your workflows that you have, the nice thing with Entwine is that it could be customized to fit your workflow. Every university, every school has a different types of workflows that they work with, and we can work with you on that. In terms of a diagram, what that would look like, so in your classes, you have the encoders, right, the SMP, and you have all your cameras and microphones and switchers and everything else, which would feed into the SMP. And then Entwine, which is our enterprise media platform, that would sit in the centralized location. It could be on-prem, or it could be on the cloud. And then it has the ability to do things like, you know, you could do trimming, you could do editing, you could do closed captioning as well too at that point of time. We have the ability to tie in with LDAP as well, or Active Directory, or SHIB, or any kind of a single sign-on that you guys are using. And then from there, from Entwine, you have the ability to publish out into a video lounge, which we'll talk about, or the LMS. And then the three major components to Entwine. The first component is the content administration side, which is the admin UI. So that's where you would pull the schedules. That's where you would schedule the boxes. That's where you would indicate, okay, you have the closed captioning workflow invoked for the class, or the instructor could go in there and pick and choose as far as if they want to upload a recording that they've done on their phone, you have the ability to do that as well. The second component is a video lounge, and what that is, that's like a private YouTube-like experience. So it's fully brandable, and we'll talk about that. And the third component is the HTML5 player that allows you to play back that content with all the different modes we saw earlier. So as far as with the content administration side, I mean, this is the a UI for what that would look like. And as I said earlier, I mean, over here you have the ability to pull in scheduling from anywhere with that. And what you see right here are recordings and courses, and you can make that fully granular as you want it to be. So let's say, as an instructor, you only have access to recordings, and that's it. And courses is an admin task that the instructional technologist would have access to create ties to the LMS at that point. So you can make it as granular as you want it to be in terms of who has access to what. You know, we have the ability to go in there and also do some kind of edits and trims. And these edits and trims could be a destructive or a non-destructive. So let's say if you want to go in there and remove the front end and the back end, kind of like what we had in here, what they're going to do is they're going to go in there and trim that first part out so they don't have that be part of it. And you can do it directly from Entwine itself. You know, in terms of managing it, where it's going to go, where it's going to publish into. Let's say for certain classes, you want to publish into the LMS. For certain classes, you want to publish into the video lounge. You have the option to do that as well from there. And of course, being HTML5 based, it's fully compatible with any browser out there as well. So, you know, you're not going to be able to, I mean, you will be able to access it from anywhere. In terms of scheduling, I mean, you have a lot of different options with the SMP. You could schedule the box locally, like you could tie it to a calendar file, or you could have it import an iCalendar file automatically. You could have it tied to Entwine, and then Entwine then schedules the boxes. Or you could be ad hoc, as I told you earlier. Somebody could walk up to the room, and if there's a panel, I enter in my information, and then it'll initiate recording from there. And from there, it'll automatically take the content and deposit it to a centralized location at that point. So there's a lot of different options that you could play around with this and see how you want to accomplish your goal. I talked about, question, go ahead, sorry.
With the calendaring, can it reach out to remote CalDAV sources for getting those iCal files? Like, Google Calendar, so you could just actually manage a Google Calendar or something like that?
You can, yeah. So there's a few different ways you could do that. So the question was if we can do a remote calendaring as well. So with that, I mean, you could tie it, and you can tie it natively, the SMP box itself, to the calendar. It could be an iCalendar file. You could tie it natively to Exchange, a Google, or any of the other popular options. Within Entwine as well, we have the ability to import the calendars and automate that, and it'll import it into Entwine. And then from a centralized location, then you're scheduling it out from there. So a use case for you would be like these are multiple calendars for each class, I'm assuming, on a Google Calendar that you want to import in?
Or maybe a room.
A room, okay.
So
Yeah,
that
yeah.
You could just look at one room and say when you're going to fire off the system.
Absolutely, yeah. So if, let's say, you have that, I mean, you could do it per box at that point, too, and just have it import the calendars. And you could point it to a location. And let's say from a Google Calendar, it automatically updates, and it can go look there every week or something and update it from there. With Entwine, it's going to do it automatically. It's going to be always in sync. But with the boxes as well, you have the capability, which is a nice thing about the SMP and the Entwine ecosystem. I mean, you could start small and go with something as simple as a solution with a one-button studio application, but it can grow into anything you wanted to go at that point. I mean, the applications for that are huge. I mean, it could be a nursing labs. We've seen this be used in speech classes. It could be libraries. It could be anywhere at that point of time. So there's options with that. With the video lounge that I was showing you earlier, this is fully customizable. So let's say within your education portal, you want to have an access point for students that's independent of the LMS for them to access content. So let's say you've done a recording for a special event that you want to upload for parents to view or for a public to view, then you can use this portal for that. And you can upload the content in there. And again, because being HTML5 based, it's going to be fully compatible. And you can also have it tied to LDAP as well, too, or Active Directory. So let's say you have content that's available for public consumption. You can also have content that's tied to, let's say the students, they are in certain classes and they want to only view that content. So you can make that be behind a login access as well. And as I said earlier, because being HTML5 based, it's fully compatible. You can use any type of a device, any type of browser to access that page. It'll automatically render and show you what exactly that page would look like. There won't be any issues or problems with that, and you can log in from there at that point. Let's talk about some support issues, right? So when we looked at the one-button studio earlier, or the studio station earlier, with that, I mean, there's a lot of things that you need to consider. I mean, choice of a display is one, right? I mean, you want to ensure that whatever you're using has the capability to be tied into RS-232 or anything like that, because if you do IR, they need to get out of sync. If somebody connects a USB drive and somebody powers on the display and manually, then it goes into power off mode. Those are some things to keep in mind that you want to ensure that either a display is IP controllable or you can control it via RS-232. Based on a USB as well too for those studios, what kind of a USB you're using. If you're using FAT32 versus NTFS, NTFS gives you more scalability in terms of sizes that you can save over there. Well, FAT32 allows you to jump around between iOS or a Mac or a Windows or something like that. We looked at lighting, and we saw as far as how that could play an issue and a factor and a role as well too. And that's really important, because when you're doing a recording and it doesn't look right, then it's a waste of time for everybody at that point of time. And the best practices I showed you earlier, I mean, if you apply those standard things, then you can get a very solid recording with that. As far as with content and management, we talked about that. I mean, something using like Entwine, I mean, you are able to pretty much take that content and record it and upload it to a centralized location at that point of time and view that content as well. Some things I want to touch upon with the SMP boxes itself. I mean, there are a few things with that. There's some automation that's there. So things like you can define storage a priority. So let's say for certain schools, they don't want to allow you to record to the front a USB drive, you know what I'm saying? So like if they're working with a military but Naval Postgraduate Academy, I mean, they don't want anything to be recorded on the USB. They just want internal recording that gets uploaded to a secure site and stays there. So the box is fully configurable. You can have it fully be specified as far as the front panel is locked out. So if they have access to the front panel, they could walk up to it, and it's not going to make any difference at that point. You could set the priority. Where do you want it to go first? You want it to be the front USB, a rear USB, the internal hard drive, and you can even specify what a size you want it to be as well too. So let's say you want to ensure that some student doesn't walk up and hit a record, and it's a recording a 4-hour session, and they've walked away. then you could specify that as well with it, that it can only be a gig or something like that. So then that'll automatically take care of the time. There's a lot of automation just in the box itself that's available. A Flex OS, something else with the SMP boxes, the 111, 351, 352. So let's say in a room like this, you have determined the optimal lighting presets. So you could have a digital I/O from the SMP trigger that and have it go to a certain preset, so it's automatically in the right lighting mode. Let's say outside the classroom, you want to trigger a LED to go on to indicate the room is now being recorded, or even for the instructor in front of them, so they see, okay, now the room is actually being recorded, so you can drive the state of the room with that. We've seen a few different other applications with this where what they've done is they have a pressure-sensitive mat, so you could walk to different areas in the room. It'll trigger the camera preset, and it'll automatically go to that location, and so then the instructor always stays within view with that. So there's a lot of things. I mean, it's pretty much up to you how you guys want to use it. Alarms and errors. So I mean, as any devices out there, there's going to be issues that may pop up. The nice thing is that these are all different things that we could monitor for, and it'll automatically trigger an email to your admin staff to indicate, okay, in certain rooms there's some issues going on that needs to be investigated. And then these are different things that we could monitor for as well. Things like there's audio loss, or the hard drive is full, or the USB is not working for somebody. For tracking purposes, where do you want it to go? And you can have it tied to SNMP traps as well. So there's a lot of things with that. So some key takeaways with this, right? So I mean, you always have to define the use case, right? Every scenario that you're going to do when it comes to streaming is different, but the basic fundamental always stays the same in terms of encoding, decoding, streaming from point A to point B, whether it's a lecture capture, whether it's one-button studio, whether it's a recording studio for a nursing sim labs. They're all the same applications at this point of time. In terms of a resolution and a bit rate, I mean, we had customers come to us, they say we want to do full-on a 1080p recording, and then we tell them, okay, well, if you want to do 1080p 80 hours a week, this is how much storage you're going to need, and they're like, oh my God, we can't do that. We can drop it down to a 720p and a 5 meg per second throughput. So those are things that you want to talk about and see as far as what's going to be the optimal viewing experience that you want to offer. If somebody's going to be viewing that content that you've recorded on an iPad or an iPhone, I mean, it's a small screen. I mean, you could get by with doing a 480p. And when you looked at the video lounge earlier, we have the ability on that to change the resolution on the fly, what's being sent out using adaptive streaming. So it'll automatically drop it down to 480p if, let's say, the information is not getting across to the other end. So there's a lot of things to consider. And storage is, of course, a huge option as well, too, because if you're storing it either on-prem, if you're storing it on the cloud, then there's always a cost associated with that. If you want to set a retention policy, let's say for classes you've recorded, some instructors are only like, okay, I want it for this particular term, and that's it. After this term, I want this thing to be automatically deleted. So you can set that up within Entwine as well. You can set as far as where do you want that storage to go. If you want it to be in fast storage based on your SAN or NAS, if you want to move it to tape, it'll support the information life cycle for that storage as well at that point. I know we covered a lot, but I have a booth that's in the main ballroom, and I'd be happy to answer any questions as well that you guys have right now, and we can show you Entwine as well. I just kind of wanted to touch upon what different options you have with regards to encoding, streaming, and capture solutions within Extron. Any questions?
What type of analytics features does it have?
Great question. So we are capturing everything right now, and we're in the process of defining what type of information you would want to see. Mm-hmm. So things like in terms of where did the student get stuck at, like which slide were they stuck at, or did they watch it again and again? If they're watching, what speed they're watching it at, where they're watching it at. So yeah, we're capturing all that, and we're in the process of defining the UI and how would that information be available for consumption. But that's a great question. Yeah. Go ahead.
Make that exportable via APIs.
Okay.
And or rich CSVs.
Rich CSV. No, that's
APIs would be great. Like, can we suck that into a data warehouse?
Right.
But CSVs minimally. Don't just make us use your UI, please.
No, which is what we do. So right now with Entwine, that's a great thing you bring up. We have APIs that are available, and if you have Entwine, we can go over that, and we make it fully open. So let's say if you have a third-party tool like a BI, it's able to import that information from Entwine into that. As an example, so within our classrooms with a touch panel with a Global View Enterprise, right? So we're able to export that information into Power BI, and then you can run analytics from there, because we understand as schools and most organizations, you already have your choice of software that you're going to use with that, right? So there's no point for us to recreate that. So we'll provide you a basic framework within our environment, and then also the ability to export that into anything that you guys are using. Because then at that point, it could be anything, you know, it really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We really need that. Oftentimes we find that's lacking,
Right.
especially in early versions of software. It takes sometimes years for somebody to add that to the API.
Right. Well, the thing is that we don't
very
want to reinvent the wheel. There's so many companies that are doing phenomenal work when it comes to that with analytics. I mean, you know, so might as well we take our data and export into that, and then you can run your metrics from there at that point. You know, so totally, yeah. Question back there, Doug.
Do you offer to your longtime Extron customers, like Portland State University, do you offer Entwine trials to let us kick the tires?
That's a great question. So we do have demos available with that as well. So we could pretty much, so Entwine is a Linux-based, and you know it can run on cloud and as well as on-prem. So we have Dockerized it into a full container format, so we could drop that into your environment on a virtual machine, and you can tie SMPs to it and to play around with it. And so we do have a demo program, or a pilot program, I should say, in place. So if you're interested, yeah, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to work with you guys on that.
Can you do that on the cloud or only on the containered virtual machines?
It can be. So because it's a containerized, it could run anywhere. It could be on the cloud. It could be on Amazon. It could be on a Google Cloud.
So your group doesn't sell a fully hosted solution.
So true. So right now it's on-prem, it's on your cloud, and software as a service is coming this year. So we will have a fully hosted solution as well.
So you will have a fully hosted solution that we can buy into without
that
having
you
to.
could buy into as software as a service. So pretty much you have an instance that you could run at that point, and you have it tied to your SMP, as well as a soft capture as well too. That's something else that's also in the works. Let's say if in a classroom you don't want to use the SMP, but you want to use soft capture. So our soft capture utility is a WebRTC based, so that could be launched from anywhere at that point. Any computer, it could be iPad, and then from there you have your Entwine information that could be tied into it, and then it'll automatically upload to the instructor folder at that point as well.
So is soft capture basically a web
It's a web utility right
that's going to use whatever is on
whatever
the laptop
camera
or whatever?
on the laptop, audio on the laptop, iPad, it could be anything at that point, because it's a web utility. It's WebRTC based, so you can launch it using any browser. That makes it cross-compatible. It could be a phone at that point in time. It really doesn't matter what that is.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so that's interesting. Any other question? Oh,
Okay, here we go.
that's a good throw right there.
So you mentioned soft capture. Can you describe? I mean, is that working with Entwine? Is that what you were just describing?
Yeah, it is working with Entwine. So pretty much what it is that with the soft capture utility, I mean, it's going to be a WebRTC based tool. That means you go to an address and it'll launch like a web applet, kind of like when you go to Zoom or Skype or something. It can launch an instance right there. It will launch that, and then it'll be behind a username and a login. So somebody logs in, and they're an authorized user, and then from there they can then initiate like recording on their laptop with the camera as well as the audio on the microphone, and then from there it'll automatically upload. It'll also actually store it locally as an MP4 and an MP3 file, and it'll record the camera and the actual screen capture separately in two separate MP4 files. So it's going to give you a dual channel capability with that. Yeah, so it's been pretty exciting with this. I mean, the feedback on this has been pretty great. I mean, and with Entwine, we're having a 2-week release cycle right now. I mean, the way we've been adding feature sets to it. I mean, you know, there's something coming out new with that every day at this point of time. And we've had the ability to design this from the ground up. It's a Linux-based, so it's fully scalable. It's designed for the future. With the SMP that you looked at, I mean, you know, it's a purpose-built piece of hardware, so it's not like, you know, like a Windows PC or Mac or something that's running. So it's very efficient in terms of how it's utilizing the resources it has. Mm-hmm. Great question. Any other questions? as far as with recordings, like, are you guys doing recordings that are full 1080p? How do you guys handle storage right now? Do you guys do storage on-prem for the guys who are recording, or do you guys do it in the cloud? And how do you figure out pricing for those things?
Well, Portland State University, Echo 360 customer since 2009. And in this last year, starting in July, we were directed to the cloud. We were leaving our PSU servers and our on-site storage that we had for a long time. So what we have found is that, you know, the migration to the cloud, generally for a student getting access to the content, has worked very nicely for us.
Right.
What we weren't prepared for is the fact that we will use the majority of what we bought in the cloud. You subscribe to the cloud basically for viewing,
Right.
And the bill-back model we have, how sustainable is it? Not very, because what's happening is people are using a lot of the older generated content that was migrated. We didn't migrate everything. We were very reaching out to our faculty. What do you want? What do you need? We'll put it up the cloud. There was changing of URLs, which caused some major work for our lecture capture personnel and also for the departments who were using that lecture capture. Where we're going to is our billing model, because we charge to use the services right now.
Right.
If we are to maintain that, we have to come up with something different, because we're not in new, fresh production like we used to be, because of a whole bunch of factors at our university. Several of my colleagues are here from Portland State to hear about lecture capture and see what other schools are doing, and I'm excited that they're here. But I'm also, you know, talking to you, talking to the other hardware vendor-related things, trying to come up with a sweet solution that would work for Portland State. But right now, going to the cloud has been a bit of a challenge, and I'm gonna.
It is, yeah, it is a challenge. I mean,
I'm looking at Michael.
it is a challenge, because when you go to the cloud, then it becomes a question of not only who owns the content. I mean, you own it, I mean, because it's software as a service, but then, then it becomes an issue of how do you migrate it out from there at that point of time, right? I mean, if you want to change services. And being educational institution, I mean, you have enough servers and storage right now, a capacity where you can store a lot of these things yourselves as well, too. Or you could run your own instance on Amazon. I mean, as education institution, you guys already have instances on Amazon that's running that you own, you know what I'm saying? So that way, the software can change, but the storage stays the same at that point of time. It's just whatever's pointing to that, you know what I'm saying? Those are excellent questions. Any other questions that I could help you guys with? Awesome. Well, I appreciate the time, guys. I'm in the main ballroom on the right-hand side. Feel free to flag me down, and if you have any questions, or come by and I can show you Entwine. I mean, I only showed you screenshots over here, but I have access to a full-on instance. And as I said, I can show you how that looks like if you have it tied to Canvas or Moodle or Blackboard. And if it's tied to that, what we're doing is we're not storing any content within the LMS. It's just a frame that we're able to take and embed that within the LMS. And we are able to use the LMS as a registry, a record, and we inherit all the properties from there at that point. But great questions, guys. I thank you very much. I appreciate your time.